Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, this is, welcome to another night of Blog Talk Radio with Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Investigations team. Tonight we're going to have a bunch of exciting info coming to us with another interview with another paranormal expert by the name of Christopher O Brien. He's an expert in Native American folklore and mythology. And we will be delving into topics tonight such as the Thunderbird and the elusive Skinwalker, which should definitely be very interesting. It's the Skinwalker is something that's not very talked about amongst Native Americans because they have a very, very petrified fear of this thing, and for good reason, as we'll find out later. But are you looking forward to tonight's show, Jer?
Yeah, it should be pretty good. Yeah, it should. And we have a caller from 928. Is this Chris?
Yep.
Oh, hey there, Chris.
How's it going, guys?
All good.
Yeah, on the phone. Yeah, this is Jeremy speaking right now, and on the phone with me I have my three other team members. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves to Chris really quick. I'm Tim.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Brent.
Yeah, and we have had a couple of questions coming in. I was going to say, to start off our interview, I was going to see if you could talk a little bit about your background and what got you involved with Native American studies and things like that.
Wow. I'm not really sure. I lived in New York City for a lot of years, and I moved out to Colorado in 1989, and I lived in quite a remote region of southern Colorado in the San Luis Valley. And hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds like I just stuck my head out the window going 100. I've always had an interest in strange phenomena and crypto creatures and legends and myths and lore of the Native Americans. And when I moved out to Colorado, I moved from Manhattan to the Twilight Zone. And it's funny. I just found out yesterday that I'm actually an 8th Cherokee. So I'm actually Native American. So I didn't know that for like 50 years. Yeah, believe it or not. I spent most of the last evening on the phone with my youngest brother, who I didn't know I even had a youngest brother, and my cousin Tina introduced us by way of the internet and kind of a family search thing, and so I guess now knowing that my great grandmother was full-blood Cherokee, everything kind of comes clearly into focus for me, and I guess I've always had some sort of affinity of for the Native American tradition, and now I understand why.
Yeah.
So, yeah, believe that or not. So hey Oprah, are you listening? So yeah, evidently I'm if I wanted to be, I could be a card-carrying Cherokee Indian, and for 50 years I didn't know that. But getting back to the subject at hand here, we live in a very strange, wonderful world, and most of us go about our lives, just sort of waking up and going to work and coming back and texting our friends and listening to music and sort of immersing ourselves in the modern sort of cultural thing that we got going on around us, and we don't really realize and don't really embrace and take into account a wonderful heritage of a magical, wonderful locale that we share here in North America. And one of the things that involves, being involved in this wonderful place is things like magic and sort of a I don't know how to put it, but just sort of a wonderful heritage of manipulating our reality, as in kind of a medicine lineage, or however you want to put it, which I'm sure we're going to talk about more here. But I'm getting all these kind of weird sort of like sounds in my handset here of like, is somebody out there like going down the highway sticking their head out the window at 100 or?
I don't know. Aren't you guys outside or anything?
No, I'm not outside. I'm in my apartment.
All weird sounds coming through my it's kind of hard to focus and concentrate when I got all these weird sounds coming through. So anyway, I'm an interesting character. I've written a bunch of books and done quite a bit of investigation and research into Native American traditions and also investigated paranormal as it relates to UFOs and unusual livestock deaths and just all kinds of wiggy stuff that most people normally don't think about in their lives. But here I am. I want to apologize for kind of a weird set of technical circumstances that we had to deal with here a couple of weeks ago, and I was supposed to be on. And I want to apologize to you guys for kind of dropping the technical ball on the show. And I'm really happy and gratified that you guys have invited me on, and love to talk about some of the stuff that I've been involved with. So take it from there.
Well, thanks again, but we just got asked a bunch of questions on your book. It's called Stalking the Trickster. I haven't read any of your books, but I have read a lot of your articles. And I know all about skinwalkers, and I was wondering, what is a trickster compared to a skinwalker? Or can you explain a little bit about what a skinwalker is?
Wait a minute, you know a lot about skinwalkers? Maybe you should kind of clue me in on the whole deal, because I've been pretty confused about the whole subject for quite a number of years since I first became aware of what a skinwalker was. So what have you found out?
Well, just from what I've found out, from what I've been interviewing people, pretty much what it is it's half, I guess you could say, I wouldn't say it's a demonic entity, but it could be in some circumstances, from what I've talked to people, sometimes there were living people that worshipped, I guess you could say, like a dark culture. I don't know what you would call that in the Native American religion, but some people worship like a dark religion, I guess you could say, and other people say that they're spirits. But they do shape-shift and all that sort of thing.
Okay,
I'm not really... I know a little bit of basics on them.
Yeah, well, Skinwalker, I was just on the Navajo Res yesterday. I do guided trips up to the Grand Canyon, one of my many jobs that I do to, pay my bills and, kind of get by in this crazy modern world that we live in. And, the Dene tradition, I mean, you have to kind of digress, I think, a little bit back and really sort of, how would I put this, define the culture, basically, that really has a belief in a system. And Skinwalkers is a Dene tradition. The Dene, of course, are the Navajo and Apache peoples that came over from Mongolia in the late 1200s, early 1300s, basically to escape Genghis Khan and the Mongol horde, when the Mongols were, raping and pillaging and having their way. There were some people that didn't want to kind of deal with that, and so they fled. And unfortunately, if you flee from Eurasia and you head north and east, you kind of end up coming across the Bering Strait during the winter, and then swinging down, into Canada, and then eventually down into the United States, which is what the Dene people did. And they arrived in the southwest United States about 100 years before the Spanish, and the Apache a little sooner. Of course, the Apache were 7 clans that sort of had a disagreement with the rank and file of the Dene people and split off, and they circled down and came down through, I guess, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and displaced the mound, the last vestiges of the mound building culture, and then swung around, down south, and then swung through Texas and New Mexico, and then kind of curled up, from New Mexico and Arizona into the southwest. The Navajo, which was the rank and file of the Dene people, continued directly south into the United States. It took about 250, 300 years for them to migrate all the way down to Canada and through the Northwest and come down the Rocky Mountains directly into the Southwest. I'm giving everybody a little bit of a history lesson here because most people don't realize that the Navajo and Apache arrived in the Southwest just shortly before the Spanish arrived. And when they did arrive, they found a very peaceful people, actually 2, the Hopi and the Zuni, one of your primordial cultures in North America, and these people didn't really know about warfare. They didn't know about the bow and arrow and killing other people, and they're very pastoral and very, very peaceful, and they lived in close-knit little apartment building groups called pueblos, and everything was all like Rodney King style. We all get along around here. And then you have these bloodthirsty Mongolian Athabascan people coming down with bows and arrows and these terrible weapons of warfare. And they came down, they displaced basically the Pueblo people, and they started massacring people, and it was pretty nasty. And then, of course, right on the heels of their arrival, then the Spanish, Coronado coming up from Mexico City, and Onate, and the poor Pueblo people were pretty much overwhelmed from the late 1400s into the mid to late 1600s, when you had your first incursion of European people. And listeners, please, there will be a test after class, so take notes. This is all very important stuff if you want to talk about the magical sorcerer tradition of the Dene people. And the Dene, again, Navajo and Apache, are the ones that bring you, our spooky dudes called skinwalkers. So, I do digress a little bit here, and thank you for bearing with me, but you can't talk about one thing without, you can't talk about the subject of skinwalkers and black magicians in the Dene tradition unless you have an idea who the Dene are, where they come from, when they arrived. And, it's kind of hard to sum all this stuff up in a quick radio interview, but that's what I write books.
Mr. O'Brien.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to digress for a quick second, but I remember talking to Jer a couple weeks ago, and he said he was reading a magazine, and they found some Asian-style writing in a canyon in New Mexico, was it, Jer, or Arizona?
Right over the border
in
New Mexico on the Zuni Reservation.
Oh, could you tell us about, if you know anything about that? I actually discussed that with some people in my philosophy class here at the university, and we had some interesting discussion about that. But seeing that you have
the one that wrote the article.
Oh, oh,
yeah. A good friend of mine is probably going to be your next governor of the Zuni Reservation. The Hopi are the primordial culture in North America. The Zuni are their younger brothers that have been here a little less. They were just slightly later arrivals than the Hopi. The Hopi say they've been on this continent for 60,000 years. Of course, classical anthropology would argue and say, no, you've only been here 6,000 years. But the Hopi are pretty adamant about that. They say, no, we've been here as long as the Aboriginal peoples have been in Australia. We've been here in North America. The Zuni are their younger brothers. The Zuni have this very interesting connection to Japan, of all places. And we won't digress into that whole territory because we don't have enough time. But one of my projects that I've, undergone here in the last 6 months is helping the History Channel with their TV series called Ancient Astronauts, which is currently being broadcast. They're doing 5 2-hour episodes. The original pilot episode was the most popular show the History Channel ever had. The production company was signed for 5 2-hour episodes, and one of the episodes I helped them produce was on the Native American tradition as it relates to ancient astronauts and ancient aliens, I think is the name of the show. And Clifford Mahudi is a Zuni elder who's running for governor of Zuni. And good old Cliff is quite an interesting character. He was in charge of civil engineering projects on Native American reservations. He worked for the Department of Interior for 30 years and is a top-notch civil engineer. And we've become friends. He introduced himself to me. He's been a fan of my work and read my books and stuff, and introduced himself. And said that a friend of his, who's a Zuni archaeologist actually, had found a slab of sandstone that had a Tibetan prayer written in it in Sanskrit. And of course, my publisher, David Hatcher Childress, is quite a famous diffusionist archaeologist. In other words, he is an archaeologist that believes that ancient cultures were all connected. They knew about each other. They had established trading routes. They did not spring up in isolated cultures, like the Egyptians knew about the Indus Valley cultures and about the Olmec and, about cultures around the world. And classical, anthropological theory is that ancient cultures all arose independent of one another and didn't know about each other. Diffusion.
Well, Mr. O Brien.
Hello.
Sorry to interrupt you for a minute, but you just mentioned the Olmec. Actually, I brought up your article, like I said, in a class of mine at the university, and one of the students who was studying or who has studied like Asian history and stuff said that sounds like perhaps the Olmecs could have been the one who came over and wrote the Sanskrit. Does that have any accuracy at all? I'm just wondering.
No, the Olmec arose in Central America and extreme southern Mexico, around Ventana, Villahermosa, that area. The Olmec are, for anybody out there that is not up to speed about Mesoamerican culture, the Olmec are famous for the big, giant, huge, 10-foot-high basalt, extremely hard basalt rock heads that they carved into these giant heads that are like 10 feet tall, and they have features of kind of Negroid sort of features, like they look like Africans with these big scowls on their face, and they have these helmets on, and these giant heads were carved and scattered around, the area around Villahermosa and La Venta down in southern Mexico, and according to diffusionist archaeologists, it appears that the Olmec culture, which is the primordial culture in Mesoamerica, was probably spawned by the Chinese coming from the Pacific and the Africans coming from the Atlantic. So, of course, the Hopi say they're Hopi, that we, after the Hopi emerged into this current fourth world 12, 15,000 years ago, the clans were sent south, east, north, and west to find out what's going on, and then to report back to the to the main mass of the Hopi. And according to the Hopi, the Olmec and the Maya were Hopi that were sent south and forgot to come back. So it depends on how deep you want to get into the subject matter. But in terms of this particular sandstone slab that was found at the Zuni Reservation about 5 years ago by an archaeologist who was assisting a dig at an ancient Pueblo site on Zuni, he happened to see this piece of sandstone sticking out of the sand, and he grabbed it, and it was just a slab of rock, and he turned it over, and there's a whole Tibetan prayer written on it, etched in stone. And that was your original question, so I'm kind of bringing the question, bringing my answer back to your question. So he, it kind of ticks me off a little bit, but he should have told the university archaeologists who were there digging for some sort of archaeological project. He should have told them that, hey, look what I found. But he didn't, because he was afraid that they were just going to take it from him, steal it, and then cover it up. I mean, when was the last time you heard about the Tibetans being carving artifacts in the Southwest on an Indian reservation? The dig comes from about the 1500s. So the your knee-jerk sort of reaction to this is, wow, they're digging at a 600-year, almost 550-year-old Pueblo site, and this one Zuni archaeologist finds a prayer in Sanskrit, and a Tibetan form of Sanskrit that's carved into a sandstone a slab. And if anybody wants to see a really well captured photograph of this, I welcome to go to my website, OurStrangePlanet.com, and you can see a photograph of this thing. I believe Dan, the archaeologist, Clifford Mahudi, who is going to be the next governor of Zuni, was the one that told me about it, and I definitely believe Clifford. And it's like, what's up with that? What the heck are we finding a sandstone slab with Tibetan prayer written on it? So, I mean, it just brings up the whole subject of diffusionist archaeology, that ancient cultures were probably all aware of each other. There were very well-established trading routes between East, West, and, the ancient peoples were a lot more sophisticated and in a place of knowledge about the rest of the world than modern sort of, modern pedantry archaeology would suggest. So, I was the one that wrote the article.
Because that's good. Yeah, because something like that could rewrite the whole history of anthropology, perhaps.
Right. Well, our academia doesn't like it when things like that happen, because they don't like to admit they're wrong. They don't like to have to admit that we need to rewrite our history books. And the Smithsonian and your mainstream archaeology and academia does not. You got to pull them kicking and screaming into the future in terms of our understanding and awareness of our past, and they just don't like to admit they're wrong. And so, yeah, it's a real problem. I mean, they found a whole cavern filled with Egyptian and Buddhist artifacts in 1909 in the Little Colorado River Gorge, where it enters the Grand Canyon. So, I mean, that's just one example of archaeological evidence that has been swooped down on by mainstream academia and covered up. It's like cosmic Watergate in the world of archaeology.
Well, we have some questions coming in about your articles on the Skinwalker. Some of the questions that I personally had, I was just wondering, You said that you had an encounter with something that you thought was a skinwalker or like a trickster, or one of these creatures you said in an article for World Explorer magazine.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it was, but at the time, let's put it this way, at the time I had no idea what it was that I experienced. It didn't make any sense. It was an experience that, I was never able to really get to the bottom of and figure out. And it was only, years later, after researching the subject of skinwalkers, just an unrelated research program, that all of a sudden I realized, whoa, what I probably experienced sounds just like a classic encounter with skinwalker. And, This is a subject area. I'm on the Navajo Res. I do guided tours for a company up to the Grand Canyon. I've been up there, 160, 170 times. Probably the only place I could go that often and never get bored in terms of the Grand Canyon. And then on the way back, we stop on the Navajo Res at the Cameron Trading Post, and there's a couple of Navajo that won't talk to me and kind of run away when I show up because of my interest in the subject of Dene sorcery. And this is the most taboo subject on the Navajo and Apache reservations. There's certain people that will never talk to you again if you possess any.
For our listeners, is there any way that you could I would say for our listeners, is there any way that you could recap on your story of the thing that you've seen outside the window?
Yeah, it's again, I'm trying to be real succinct here, and I'd love to deliver you guys some nice, neat little sound bites, like radio shows deserve. But you got to kind of qualify. Yeah, I have to qualify my answers with a little bit of background material before I just go ahead and blurt out, particular stories or, encounters. But basically, I was asked by a very well-to-do, very influential person that lived in the town that I lived in Colorado to help with what appeared to her to be a case of Navajo witchcraft. I do have a background in the Western esoteric tradition, and do know quite a bit about the Native American esoteric tradition, as much as a white boy can say that they know something about it, which is probably very little, relatively speaking. But she found a very disturbing black magic talisman behind her house on a creek, which consisted of skeletal remains and what appeared to be ritually designed accoutrements that were put on this particular skeleton, and was perceived by her and her family as being very witchcraft looking and spookier than hell. Let's put it that way. And they destroyed it and burned it, and she unfortunately didn't save it for me to see because they were too scared. And but she did call me and say, "Hey, this thing was found. I'm really nervous. Perhaps you can, come over and talk to me and help me figure out what to do." And I, of course, the first thing I said was, "Well, where is it?" And they said, "Well, we burnt it." And I said, "Well, without seeing it, it's going to be difficult for me to help, but I'll do whatever I can." So I went over and I did a blessing ceremony and did some cleansing rituals and other things, more for them than anything else. Kind of put them at ease and help calm them down. And evidently she'd had a falling out with a Native American medicine man who she was going to be helping out with some money and some land and other things, and it didn't work out, and they kind of parted angrily. And she equated the discovery of this particular magical object with the falling out with this particular medicine man. I don't know if that, was behind the actual discovery of the talisman, but it would appear that way. So anyway, I went over and I advised her on it and did this and did that. And then a couple of months later, what is that in the background? It's really difficult for me to concentrate when somebody is like licking the phone or doing whatever. I don't know who it is on the phone, but please stop. Thank you. It's really tough for me to concentrate with all these weird sounds going on the phone. I'm sorry, I'm old school that way. So anyway, a couple of months later, this is back in this would be, I guess, the fall of '98, November. I lived in this really cool house. It was out in, there it is again. Stop, whoever it is, stop. Thank you. No, somebody's licking the phone or they're doing something. They're not, it's really disconcerting. I'll put you on speakerphone and then that'll help me if you'd rather. That'll kind of, crap out my voice, but it's very difficult for me to have a phone to my ear with all these weird sounds going on. Thank you. Anyway, so I was living in a house that was out in the valley, and I had a beautiful view of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. I didn't have any houses or trees around me. I lived in a big, giant elk meadow, 2-story house. I worked construction. I did straw bale construction with, real super high-end custom Adobe finishes. Worked my ass off every day to, get a, hard scratch living. And one day I came home and I was taking a shower in my greenhouse. My bathroom hadn't been finished yet, so I had a shower in my greenhouse that faced the west. Had these plate glass windows that went, all the way across my greenhouse, about 30 feet. And I had the solar system, so I didn't have a lot of light in my house at night. But I had like a 40-watt bulb that was lighting my greenhouse, and I'm showering all the adobe off me and getting ready to relax for the evening. And I had something that it like the only way I can describe it is it glided by all my windows, 10 feet away from me. It looked like a cross between a human and a deer is the only way I can describe it. It was on 2 legs, had a rack of antlers. It had a pointed face, but it was kind of human looking. I wasn't able to see very much detail, but the thing was only 10 feet away from me, so I definitely saw the form. And it's not like it bounced like it was walking. It glided across my windows. And I'll tell you, it's probably the only time I've ever jumped out of a shower and not rinsed off. It was really, really freaky. And, I'm kind of embarrassed even telling this story because it sounds so freaking, just wanked out. But, I wasn't on drugs. I hadn't been drinking. I'd been working my ass off all day. I was, I'm a very aware observer. At that point, I'd been investigating all kinds of weirdness in the 5-county area for about 6-7 years, working with county law enforcement and scientists and ex-military people and stuff. And, I'm a pretty, I'd like to think that I'm a damn good observer. And what I saw just did not conform to, anything that I'd ever even heard of, let alone experienced. And it really, living alone in a house, a quarter mile away from your nearest neighbors, that was freaky. And this girl I was dating showed up a little while later, and we discussed it. And we had, another interesting kind of weird thing happen to the two of us. And around that same time period, I had an incident occur where I was downstairs watching TV all by myself, and something went around the whole upper story, the second floor of the house, banging on the outside of the wall, like boom, 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 all the way around the house. And you know, it's disconcerting to say the least when you know, you have something like those two things happen. And at the time, I didn't realize and didn't know that these are classic manifestations of a skinwalker. And you know, you know, of course, writing my new book, which was, you know, was just released late last year. I did do quite a bit of research into the black magic traditions of the Dene, which, you know, include, you know, skinwalkers. And I found out, you know, I'm reading through, you know, researching for a couple of weeks. I discovered these examples of very exact descriptions of events that happened to people that were what I experienced back in '98. And so I'm thinking, oh my God, you know, maybe I had some sort of like encounter with a skinwalker. So I don't know if I did, but the descriptions that I've researched and found from law enforcement reports and, you know, from you know, my research, they describe very similar incidents that happened to other people. And it wasn't until I discovered these things that I realized, oh my God, I probably had some sort of run-in or was being warned by a skinwalker. And then I back-engineered my own experience and said, oh, geez, that was just a month and a half, 2 months after I was helping this woman do some ritual cleansing after she discovered this, like, really spooky artifact behind her house. And so, you know, I've equated the events. I don't know if they're related, but I have a real sneaking suspicion that they are. You know, and here I am looking out my window. It's getting dark, and I'm looking around going, oh, geez, here I'm bringing this stuff up. A lot of people are listening. Maybe I should, like, be careful. And this is really, you know, I don't talk about this stuff very much. This is the first time I've ever really addressed this particular subject on the radio. So I want everybody out there, you all have an army of angels, each one of you. One of them is the parking spot angel, which is one of my favorites when I lived in New York. Everybody has an angel. I want you to get your angels, call upon your angels, and protect that crazy guy down there in Arizona. I'm joking, of course. I'm joking, but I'm serious.
Well, we have a caller on the line from a 210 area code that's calling in to ask you a question. And 210, you're on the air.
Yeah, this is the Boogeyman. How you doing?
The who?
This is the Boogeyman.
The billionaire? You got some extra dough, bro?
No, I'm not a billionaire. Got a question for you. We were like, I guess, the legendary, you know, Yeti, what we call Bigfoot thing. I mean, phenomenon. You know, I've heard it's basically in, we call it, you know, different states, more so in the West. I guess Siberia, I heard China the other day, okay? Have you ever, is there any sightings like in other places of the world? I would say Europe, or is it like one category, is there one place where there are more, say?
Well, yeah, in terms of Bigfoot, yeah. You know, my publisher, David Hatcher Childress, just released a book called, let me grab a copy of it, I think Sasquatch, Yeti, and Hairy Beast or something. Let me just get the book. And he's got an incredible section in there on European. He's got a chapter on European reports. It's called Yetis, Sasquatch, and Hairy Giants. And it's from Adventures Unlimited. And he's got a whole section in there on Eurasian Bigfoot reports that you couldn't really call them Yeti, which of course are, you know, Himalayan reports, and the Himalayan version, Nepal, Bhutan, northern India. But yeah, there's in fact, there's been a fairly recent outbreak of wild man, they call them, reports from Siberia, and there's actually some pretty famous photographs of a dead Bigfoot that were published in a French magazine back in the 60s or 70s, if memory serves me correct. I have to check my facts on that, but some very close-up photographs of a dead wild man or Bigfoot I'm pretty sure it came from the Caucasus Mountains. I'm not sure, but the book's Yeti, Sasquatch, and Hairy Giants. I highly recommend. It's got a huge photograph section with color photographs of. I thought I knew a lot about Bigfoot until David started researching this book, and then I saw his photography, the photograph section. I was like just slack-jawed. I just could not believe that there was so much photographic evidence of Bigfoot. Some of which you could say, oh well, maybe that could be a hoax, but some of them, I mean, there's just. I mean, if it's lying dead in a sideshow and you get these really good photographs, it's very difficult to hoax something like that. So, yes, there are reports from, the Caucasus Mountains, which would be, northern Yugoslavia in that area, all the way kind of east into the, the Stans, Kurdistan, Uzbekistan, that sort of area, and then into the Altai, which is around the south end of Lake Baikal. There's, a tradition of Bigfoot and, giant hairy guys that extends back into prehistory.
Yeah. I mean, is there in let's say, like Europe, let's say like, France, Germany, so that type area, I'm going to say? Because I hear everything, here's the U.S., okay, Asia a lot, okay, but is there like real sightings, I mean, Europe, not like Czechoslovakia type stuff, but I don't know, basically Europe, you know what I'm trying to say? Western Europe. Anything there?
Not as much. I really, again, not really having researched that particular part of the world in terms of Bigfoot reports. There isn't quite the tradition that we have, say, in the Pacific Northwest or Canada, British Columbia, or places that skunk apes, down south in America. But I'm sure if there are, you're going to find it in David's book because it's pretty extensive. I'm kind of looking to it right now.
In your opinion, okay, why do you believe? Okay, I mean, there's sightings. There's no doubt there's something out there. I mean, because there's sightings all over the world. Try to say or something. But it's why do you think there's been no real, let's say, like evidence found? You know what I mean? Like you find dead animals, other stuff, per se, why do you have to see, why do you believe there's no real, let's say no real, to like a body type thing showing up so often?
That's a good question. David Childress and I have had several conversations about this. He is from the Loren Coleman sort of cryptozoology school of these are undiscovered, super intelligent, quasi-humanoid type forms. And I've actually had what I consider to be two fairly close encounters with what I would describe as Bigfoot creatures. I did not see them. In one case, I smelled them. In both cases, I heard them. I'm quite, shall we say, I'm very aware when I'm out in nature, and my brothers had an encounter, and my grandfather actually, my adopted family, my grandfather had an encounter in 1918. So I've always been fascinated with this subject. I've done quite a bit of research, but one of the things that I differ with David on in this subject matter is I have a sense that these creatures have access to some sort of magical ability, if you will. I believe that they somehow have access to some sort of shape-shifting, time dilation. They're able to teleport themselves. There's so many reports where these creatures are seen in one place in one instant, and then boom, they're like on the other side of you. They're 100 yards away. They seem to be able to teleport themselves. They seem to have some sort of technological ability to be in one place at 1 second and teleport themselves to another place. They seem to have the ability to appear and disappear through a system of acoustic sounds that are whistles and clicks. I have a sense that they have some sort of ability that cryptozoology, I think the mainstream does not acknowledge. I don't think that they're paraphysical or metaphysical creatures. I think that they have the ability to appear to be paraphysical or metaphysical. I don't think that they're completely flesh and blood creatures that have escaped the classification by scientists and people. I think that they have some sort of quality, element, ability that's above and beyond that. If that
Mr. O'Brien,
that would explain why we haven't found bones, remains. We haven't been able to gain, real definitive physical evidence about them.
Well, I was going to just comment further on your hypothesis that these things are interdimensional creatures somewhat. Actually, within physics, I'm not. You might be aware of this or not. I don't know. In physics,
You're
there's
the
actually
one that said interdimensional, not me.
Oh, sorry. In physics, there's this prevailing theory actually coming out that there are definitely multiple dimensions beyond even our comprehension, and these creatures might be able to go through these dimensions. I don't know. That's just maybe that's delving into metaphysics too much, but.
Well, that's what I just said. They're paraphysical in that they have the ability to access some sort of dimensional capability. I feel they are a three-dimensional creature. It's like a UFO. I mean, if you see a UFO and it morphs, from a single object into three objects, or changes its shape, or does something in terms of its apparent shape and size that doesn't conform with Einsteinian physics. Is it multidimensional? Is it paraphysical? Is it metaphysical? We don't know, but it does seem to indicate that it has the capability to access some sort of heightened level of technology or capability. I believe, I really have a sense. I don't believe, but I have a sense that Bigfoot are similar in that regard.
Do you believe they're evolving?
I don't believe anything. I don't believe anything that I'm saying. I don't believe anything that you're saying. I have a hard enough time believing I'm here in this physical reality. I rarely use the B word, believe.
Okay.
I think, and I suspect, that they're very happy with the level of evolvement that they have. That's why all of a sudden, it ain't Harry and the Hendersons in their learning how to drive cars or become bus drivers or something. I have a sense that they are very comfortable with their existence, and so they don't really have a need or a desire to evolve in terms of technological accessing technology or developing technology. I have a sense that they're very, very happy with their current state of existence. So
you think they
maybe they're evolving in terms of their thinking, their ability to escape detection, but I think it would probably be limited to that.
So you think that they can control it somehow? Their I guess bodies and that type of thing, or everything. If they can control, because I didn't think you actually control that. This kind of happens. Depending where you're at. But, so you're saying they can actually control the I guess their evolution type. I
think they have some sort of knowledge about some sort of ancient teleportation ability. I think at some point in time humans were able to teleport themselves. I think it has something to do with tapping into some sort of harmonic grid that the planet has is part of. I think harmonically they have some sort of harmonic ability that has to do with teleporting themselves, being in one place one instant, in another place in the next instant. I've personally had an experience that I equate to Bigfoot, where I had what I assume, and again, this is all my own, interpretation of my own experience, and I can't prove any of this, and I don't suggest that this is the end-all, be-all explanation, but I had an experience where I had one in front of me within 150, 200 feet, and then in one instant after it made this strange whistling sound, it was all of a sudden behind me. And it wasn't a bird, it wasn't an animal, it wasn't some sort of natural sound. It was definitely, something highly strange, out of the ordinary. I was, at the base of Mount Rainier in the spring. There was nobody for miles around me. I was intruding on the environment in the very early spring, and I really do feel I had an encounter with not one but two, actually, big feet, Bigfoots.
So you're,
I'm not sure how you. What's the plural of Bigfoot? Is it big feet?
Question. Big feet? It can't be Bigfoot. That's a good question. I never. That's a very good question.
So anyway, I do have a sense that they have some sort of exalted knowledge, some sort of applied knowledge that gives them the ability to be here one second, gone the next. God forbid, or goddess forbid, you should ever smell one. My first experience in '79 started with smelling a Bigfoot, and there have been very few things in my life that have smelled worse. Imagine, we are on the radio, so human excrement combined with some sort of nasty sweat, all rolled into like an incense stick with maybe some jizz, some sort of sexual musk kind of flavor with human excrement and sweat all rolled into one and then stuffed up your nose. That's what a Bigfoot smells like.
So you're saying you believe they're more highly developed, I guess, in the mindset, okay, but on a physical sense, right? Would that be your first statement, do you think?
I don't believe anything. Like I said, I don't believe anything. I suspect that they have...
Suspect.
I suspect that they have the capability to access some sort of hidden knowledge that has to do with teleportation, has to do with camouflage, that has to do with communication, that does not conform to what we would, equate with modern scientific ability. There is, in my mind, there is some aspect of that that's operative here in terms of these creatures. I don't think they need to access these abilities very often, but they do have the ability. If they need to, be there one second, gone the next. My brother had a sighting or an experience. He didn't actually see the creatures, but he was in 1974 or 73, I forget the date, but he was riding horses it was near Gold Bar, Washington, just below Stevens Pass, on the west side of Stevens Pass in Washington State. He was living at a group home, and they were out riding horses. He was riding up in a pretty remote area, away from any houses, any sort of, he was in the BF nowhere, let's put it that way. And they were rounding a corner on a logging road, and they smelled the smell, and the horses reared, bucked them off. They had to, quiet the horses down, and they continued walking around this curve in the logging road, and they found 3 footprints, one on the edge of the road, one in the middle of the road, and one on the other side of the road. And then there was one print that was like scooped out of the hillside, like it was scrambling up the hill, and they found a broken branch of a pine tree at the top. It was like they were walking through a cut in it was a logging road that was kind of cut into the hillside, but there was only those 4 footprints on the edge of the road, in the middle of the road, on the other side of the road, and then one going up the hillside, which is about 7, 8, 9 feet tall, and a broken branch. The footprint on the side of the road, before the footprint going up the hill, the the weeds were still rising out of the footprint. That's how close they were to actually experiencing it. In other words, the horses, when they reared and smelled, and when they smelled this thing, the thing had just crossed the road because it had stepped on weeds, and the weeds were still rising out of the footprint. So, in fact, the footprint in the middle of the road was so pristine that the University of Washington was able to get like a fingerprint from the footprint. They were able to actually. It was so pristine in clay, damp clay, that they could ID the thing with the skin whorls in the print.
Expect their predators?
But there was no. My point is, there were no footprints coming to the road, or no footprints from the top of the little hill away. There was just the 4 prints. So the thing, all of a sudden, the only evidence that they were able to ascertain that it was there was just those, on the road and going, taking that one step up the hill. It disappeared. There were no tracks from where it went, and no tracks from where it came from. And so that's kind of influenced my thinking, I think, in this regard. And it's my brother. It actually became a fairly notorious sighting.
Do you suspect the predators or not? Or do they have any natural?
I know they are.
The predators?
I had 7 reports in the San Luis Valley in '94, and 3 of the reports had to do with the Bigfoot and hunting. One report was a hunter observed 2 that seemed to be stalking a herd of elk. Another report was of 2 sets of tracks that came all the way down from a mesa area where the elk herds hang out, down to the Conejos River, and the sheriff, or the undersheriff, and his father were able to videotape, several hundred yards of footprints, and they found drops of blood in conjunction with the footprints, and they had the blood tested, and it was elk blood. It was like one of the 2 creatures they figured was carrying a big, like a haunch of elk haunch that was bleeding out, dripping blood in the tracks. So up until that point, I thought Bigfoot were herbivores, or omnivores. I didn't think that they really were meat eaters. But reading David's book, Yetis, Sasquatch, and Hairy Giants, I find out that Yetis have been, for hundreds of years, have been reported attacking yak herds in Tibet and Nepal, and carrying off, yaks, and I guess for food. So in the San Luis Valley where I lived, it's a semi-arid desert environment. So there's, you're not going to be living on berries and herbs and nuts and things like that. You're going to have to be an omnivore and, have to be meat eating to survive if you're, 7 feet tall, 8 feet tall, and weigh, 400 pounds.
Do you suspect they got, let's say, in natural, let's say, enemies, or are they top of the food chain out there? Besides in other words, let's say.
Good question. Nope, I think they're top of the food chain. There were reports from the 1880s and 1890s of a creature that used to visit the miners around Liberty and Duncan, Colorado, which are now ghost towns, and they named him Boji, and they used to leave him food, and he hung around because they were feeding him. He hung around, and it's only when they stopped feeding him that he moved on. So I think they're like a stray cat. If you feed them, they'll hang out. If there's a food source.
Sorry to interrupt you guys, but we have about 30 seconds left on our show.
Wow, you're kidding me.
Yep.
We're done?
Yes, we have 15
I thought we were talking about skinwalkers. We never even began the discussion. Which is probably a good thing, but cool. Well, whatever.
Well,
hello.
Thanks for calling in, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. So, oh wow, I guess we're gonna have to do this again or something.
Yeah.
I never even really started talking about skinwalkers. Jeez. Probably a good thing. So, you know, yeah, what can I say? I mean, you know, geez, sometimes an hour seems like